Thank you so much, Kathy. Kathy's taken very good care of me. And it was really nice to get an introduction to you by going to the community poetry reading just previously, and that was wonderful. Thank you. Visit 100,000 Poets for Change. And I think anytime you engage with the imagination, you are making change in this world. So, thank you. I've traveled a long ways to get here, several flights, and I'm happy to be here. I've never been to Queensbury before. One of your residents said neither has he. But I've been in the area. I've been to Albany. I've been all up in, I was in a Seneca Longhouse. I've been all up in the area for years off and on through my life. And anyway, it's good to be here, and I see the leaves are just starting to think about changing. And also what's cool is this is the closest event to my book, my new book, Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings. The official pub date is tomorrow. Yeah. That's exciting, along with the eclipse, which always brings about changes of some sort or the other. Some we like, and sometimes we don't like changes at all, even as much as we say we want change. I also want to talk, somebody was told me that Tom Huff, the sculptor, lives in the area, and he was a student when I taught at the Institute of American Indian Arts. I taught there a couple of times. And that was where I went to Indian boarding school. I left Oklahoma to go to school there. It was in the late 70s. And he and I became very close. We did a magazine. We would do these. It was interesting. There was one high school class left, and the rest, it was an associate degree program then. Now it's a full-blown arts college with an MFA. The first MFA is in creative writing. And they're doing pretty well with that. But what we did, I had the largest Indian club, they were all Indian clubs. Yeah, it was Indian school. The largest, that's the jet lag, so please, yeah, please forgive the jet lag talking. But it was because, and I always tell people who are doing clubs, and we always, at schools, whatever school, is we had served food we had snack, we always had something to eat, so everybody came. Even people who weren't writers were interested in, they came. And then I did something, I didn't ask for permission. They probably would have said no because it was still under the old Bureau of Indian Affairs system. About every month or two we would have, we had the Red Earth Writers Club, and we would do readings and performances. So the students all got to read their poetry, and they looked forward to that, some of them did. And then I brought in poets and musicians, native musicians from all over, and they would come in just for nothing, and they would come in and perform with the students. So then we would raise money for our small magazine called Corn Soup, and it was Tom Huff's corn soup. By the way, he makes excellent corn soup. I should have let him know. I didn't realize I was so close to where he was. And we would sell corn soup and bread and make money, and the place would be packed. And the administration never knew what we were doing, but the students all remember. Anyway, I wanted to start out with a song in honor of Tom's people and the people who are the original keepers of this land. Most people don't know that there are keepers of the land, of the places we live, people who are charged with taking care of. And I remember talking with Gary Farmer, the actor who is from up not too far from here. We were talking about it. Yeah, he came to one of my classes once, or a couple of times, and we were talking about the keepers of the land, and he was talking about how, we were talking about how at some of these major earth tragedies is that what's happened is that the keepers of the land were removed, or somehow, overtaken, and that's what can happen. But on some level, they're still here, and there's usually somebody that takes care of this place. But you don't always know them or see them. And sometimes even people in the community know who they are, and sometimes they don't, because it's not something you take on to be seen. It's It's a heavy responsibility. And as you know, with heavy responsibility, sometimes the fewer people know about it, the better. We all have responsibility, every one of us. You know, just as we all came in with a gift to share, gifts to share, and it's important. Or we get blocked up if we don't share them, and all kinds of havoc ensues. So this is in honor of those keepers who love children. This opens the book. For calling the spirit back from wandering the earth in its human feet. Sometimes we get lose track of our spirit or parts of our spirit when there's been trauma. You know, what happens to that part of yourself when there's an accident and you don't remember? Or there's some kind of, where does that go? Where does that part of yourself go that when you get smaller because of some kind of derision, or you turn away from a challenge that your spirit wanted to face, but then you gave in to fear? So this is a poem to call those parts of the spirit back. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you. Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essences of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude. If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream, planting itself precisely within your parents' desire. Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time. Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them. Don't worry. The heart knows the way. Though there may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves. The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time. Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar sage or other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame. Let go of the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go of the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction. Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse. You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long. Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now you can have a party. Invite everyone you know who loves and supports you, and keep room for those who have no place else to go. Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short. Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark. So I like hearing about the Jewish New Year, and we all have New Year's in our tribe. I'm a member of the Muskogee people of Jehovah ceremonial ground, and our New Year is in the summer, and it always falls around late June. You know, the solstice. Let's do a lot. If you look at the whole world, I mean, these celebrations and ceremonies kept us in line with the way the Earth's relationship to the sun, and so on and so on. Anyway, we all have stories. I think probably every culture has a trickster of sort, somebody who gets out of hand. And I always remember that the Jewish writer, who is that Isaac, how do you say his, Bashivas? Yes, Bashivas. I love his stories. And I always remember the one about, what is it? What is that figure? It starts with a G. Yes, thank you. So there's a golem in this. This is in a way we make them with our thoughts. You think about it. Sometimes you have these thoughts following you around, and they're made of all these doubts and fears and other things. And then they can get out of hand. And that's usually what happens with them. So in the one trickster, for some it's spider. Spider can be a weaver. In some tribes and people, it's a trickster. And for some, it's coyote. Like the roadrunner too, and the coyote. There it is. But the coyote, and for us, it's the rabbit. A lot of West African tribes too. The rabbit, or our tribe, it's the rabbit or chuffy. Anyway, this is a contemporary old rabbit story, and you'll hear what I mean. In a world long before this one, there was enough for everyone until somebody got out of line. We heard it was a rabbit, fooling around with clay in the wind. Everyone was tired of his tricks, and no one would play with him, and he was lonely in this world. So Rabbit thought to make a person. And when he blew into the mouth that crude figure to see what would happen, the clay man stood up. Rabbit showed the clayman how to steal a chicken. The clayman obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal corn. The clayman obeyed. Then he showed him how to steal someone else's wife, and that clayman obeyed. Rabbit felt important and powerful, and clayman felt important and powerful. And once that clayman started, he could not stop. Once he took that chicken, he wanted all the chickens. Once he took that corn, he wanted all the corn. And once he took that wife, well, he wanted all the wives. He was insatiable. Then he had a taste of gold. And he wanted all the gold. Then it was land or anything else he saw. His wanting only made him want more. Soon it was countries. Then it was trade. The wanting infected the earth. We lost track of the purpose and meaning of life. We began to forget our songs and stories. We could no longer see or hear our ancestors or talk with each other across the kitchen table. Forests were being mowed down all over the world to make more, and Rabbit had no place to play. Rabbit's trick had backfired. Rabbit tried to call the clayman back, but when that clayman wouldn't listen, Rabbit realized he'd made a clayman with no ears. And in this book, I have these little riffs, these little moments that I stick in here in between the poems. Some of them turned into poems. Some of them became like prose poems, and some are just little riffs. Listen to an alto sax player jamming on the street. He played a few jazz standards, mostly popular tunes that people would know who changed buses there. Nice tone. I walked from the hotel into the dusk of the city to listen closer, to speak with him. We shared names, gear info, and other stories of the saxophone road. He told me, I'm making a living out of small hopes. There's something about a lone horn player blowing ballads at the corners of our lives. It's called No. Yes, that was me you saw shaking with bravery, with the government-issued rifle on my back. I'm sorry. I could not greet you as you deserve, my relative. They were not my tears. I have a reservoir inside. They will be cried by my sons, my daughters, if I can't learn how to turn tears to stone. Yes, that was me standing in the back door of the house in the alley with fresh bread and corn for the neighbors. I did not foresee the flood of blood, how they would forget our friendship and return to kill the babies in me. Yes, that was me whirling on the dance floor. We made such a racket with all that joy. I loved the whole world in that silly music. I did not realize the terrible staccato dance and the staccato of bullets. Yes, I smelled the burning grease of corpses. And like a fool, I expected our words might rise up and jam the artillery in the hands of dictators. We had to keep going. We sang our grief to clean the air of turbulent spirits. Yes, I did see the terrible black clouds as I cooked dinner, and the messages of the dying spelled there in the ashy sunset. Everyone addressed Mother. There was nothing about it in the news. Everything was the same. Unemployment was up. Another queen crowned with flowers. Then there were the sports scores. Yes, the distance was great between your country and mine. Yet our children played in the path between our houses. No. We had no quarrel with each other. This one's called Once the World Was Perfect. It's kind of an origin story poem. There's been so many worlds, you know, and I think the way it is, and you hear these stories all over the world, you know, and then fourth world, fifth world, about how humans are given this paradise in so many words, and then we have it for a while, and then we start fighting with each other, and pretty soon we destroy it, and then we're given a new world with more instructions on how to live. And then we go through that one, you know. But we learn. We all learn it eventually, and we'll only get there together. There's not going to be one make it and nobody else. It's all or nothing. Once the world was perfect, and we were happy in that world. Then we took it for granted. Discontent made a small rumble in the earthly mind. Then doubt pushed through with its spiked head. And once doubt ruptured the web, all manner of demon thoughts jumped through. We destroyed the world we had been given for inspiration for life. Each stone of jealousy, each stone of fear, greed, envy, hatred, put out the light. No one was without a stone in his or her hand. There we were, right back where we had started. We were bumping into each other in the dark, and now we had no place to live since we didn't know how to live with each other. Then one of the stumbling ones took pity on another and shared a blanket. The spark of kindness made a light. The light made an opening in the darkness. Everyone worked together to make a ladder. A wind-clan person climbed out first into the next world, and then the other clans, the children of those clans, their children and their children, all the way through time to now, into this morning light, to you. It takes place relatively nearby, but not really, in Connecticut, Mystic. And I love that town. It's got some intense history. And so this poem came to me there. And I just found out I'm really blown away about this award, and I'm terrified about doing this talk to the Academy of American Poets, but I've been working on it. Right now it's about 30 pages. And but it's going towards, I'm talking about young Native writers. That's what I'm thinking. You know, I work with students, and I've talked to them about poetry ancestors. We all have ancestors. We have blood ancestors, but we all have the ancestors of what we study. There's poetry ancestors, ancestors of psychological thought, etc., etc. You know, and so that's what I'm doing in this talk, is looking at Native poets, because it's in New York, looking at the people the Lenape poetry ancestors, and then working through to these young Native poets. Really, there's an incredible group of young Native poets writing today, very active. They're all over, and from everywhere, Inupiaq, from up in Alaska to Mojave, there's Joan Kane, D.G. Nanook Okpuk, from also in Inuit and Inupiaq, Natalie Diaz, who's been all over, who's Mojave. I mean, there's Sherman Bitsui, Navajo, Dene, just a lot of them. So that's where I want to wind up, because I want these people to hear about these young Native poets carrying it forward. But what I've learned, because there's always, I tell my students, there's always research, and always with poems and everything. I'm always, it doesn't end. You're always, a saxophone too, or whatever. You're always studying and learning. So what I found out is that the first poem, native poem to be published in this country, and that doesn't mean there were native songs, there are and were native songs of very lively poetic traditions, many, there are over 500 something tribes. But the first one was published in Greek and Latin by a name, a young man they named Eliezer. There's no last name. I don't know, they don't know, we don't know his tribe. But he was published in a collection. He did an elegy for a teacher, one of his church teachers, and we don't know much about him. He went to Harvard. You know, Harvard used to be a native college, at least part of it was initially. And so we don't know too much about him. But I was thinking, Cotton Mather, you know, I have my problems with him. And my arguments, I argue with Cotton Mather frequently. So he winds up in this poem. I guess, I don't think I named Mather particularly here, no. But I was thinking of him. For some reason I thought I'd put Mather in here, but it's still good to know that, you know, that was the first one. But I think about the song traditions he came from, and how these song traditions continue. Even in my own poetry, I mean, I started writing, at Indian school there were a lot of poetry going on, but I didn't write poetry then. And I started writing when I was a student at the University of New Mexico, and I got to hear wonderful poets from all over. I heard Galway Canal, I heard him read The Bear, and I heard him read. He's one of my favorite poets, The Book of Nightmares, and I got to hear Anne Waldman, when she still kind of read like this. Before, you know, she became her poetry, you know, so to speak, and so on. But what opened the door for me, and I loved Emily Dickinson growing up, I always read a lot of poetry. But what opened the door for me being a participant was hearing that there was native people writing poetry. Because before I could enjoy it, but I didn't realize totally it could be from us and our lands. And then I went looking, of course, for my own tribe's poetry and found Alexander Posey, who turned out to be a relative, very well published in his time. And then the poetry I found at the ceremonial grounds. It exists in the songs, and it exists in these very eloquent speeches, speech making. It's just beautiful to hear. So, anyway, all this to get back to In Mystic. And we do walk through history. I mean, there's history around here. I don't know the history here in particular. You know, we trudge back and forth through our own history, sometimes too often. But sometimes in order to, and I've learned this as being part of the family that shifts and moves and goes through our stuff and society, you know, we all deal with historical trauma in this country, whether we deal with it or not, it's here. And so this is part of it. But I've learned that if you speak or sing something, it kind of lifts it up. You're able to move if you bring it up out of the deep. It doesn't make it less horrible, but what it does is it puts it, okay, it's here. Okay, then what do we do about it? Rather than let's just keep it down here and pretend it didn't happen. Well, it always emerges and not when you want it to, you know. In Mystic, my path is across the burning trees, lit by crows carrying fire in their beaks. I ask the guardians of these lands for permission to enter. I am a visitor to this history. No one remembers to ask anymore, they answer. What do I expect in this New England seaport town near the birthplace of democracy, where I am a ghost? Even a casino can't make an Indian real. Or should I say native, or savage, or demon? And with what trade language? I am trading a backwards look for jeopardy. I agree with the ancient European maps. There are monsters beyond imagination that troll the waters. The Puritans determined ships did fall off the edge of the world. I am happy to smell the sea. walk the narrow, winding streets of shops and restaurants, and delight in the company of friends, trees, and small winds. I would rather not speak with history, or I did not want to speak with history, but history came to me. It was dark before daybreak when the fire sparked. The men left on a hunt from the Pequot village, here where I stand. The women and children left behind were set afire. I do not want to know this, but my gut knows the language of bloodshed. Over 600 were killed to establish a home for God's people, crowed the Puritan leaders in their Sunday sermons. And then history was gone in a betrayal of smoke. They were still burning, though we live in a democracy erected over the burial ground. This was given to me to speak. Every poem is an effort at ceremony. I ask for a way in. I'll read this one. This is called the Indian School Night Song Blues. Indian school I went to was a Bureau of Indian Affairs school, but then it became an experimental school for arts because they discovered that the Indian students were very good at art and it had a great effect. You know, I mean, they were creating beautiful art and it shifted the culture than the usual Bureau of Indian Affairs school curriculum. I mean, when I went to school there and then I taught there later, the English classes were often held in a room that was lined with stoves and little kitchens. And that was because the generation right before mine was taught the women were taught how to cook and clean so they could clean for people in town. They weren't taught poetry. And that wasn't that far. I was there in the late 60s, so it was, 50s, early 60s. So it was a big shift to look to art, and think, oh, okay, we could do another kind of curriculum here. And so we had some of the finest Indian artists teaching. And it was the late 60s. And there was Santa Fe and the hippie culture, they were all there going up into Taos area, a lot of communes, so students would take off and come back. And so we had all of that going on all at once, and these wonderful teachers. And we all had the old BIA system too. We were not supposed to speak our native languages. And I had all Apache roommates, the first room I was in, and so we would learn Apache at night, and if you heard the dorm matron coming, everybody would stop, because people would get punished for speaking. And yet, they were wonderful dorm people who really loved us. They cared for us, and we knew that, just like the teaching there. And that school saved a lot of our lives. I know it saved mine. But we were students, and a lot of us, are sent from home, often students sent from home. I guess in some cultures it's for a better education, but mostly kids would rather be home, I think. If most kids in the world would. And they've learned that Indian native runaways are different. They don't run away from home, they usually run towards home. But there we were all there because of some kind of trouble for the most part. But here we were learning art. But sometimes they call it, this is even a military term, restriction, I think. And if you got caught drinking, and a lot of that went on, or other infractions, you would have to stay in the dorm room on the weekend, and you could only go out and do your detail and go to classes and come back. You couldn't go hang out and lounge. This was what teenagers like to do, lounge around, visit, and everything. But what we found out is a restriction, and I was restricted once, was that people felt sorry for you there, and you got more alcohol than you got elsewhere. So this poem is actually part of the story, and it's this young woman, they were sitting around the table in the main dorm at restriction, and talking about to the different students there, their stories. There's so many stories. Everybody has a story, Indian School Night Song Blues. I called to order the meeting of girls on restriction at Indian school, locked up in the dorm. We broke the rules. Now it's Saturday night. No booze, you lose. Music courtesy of KOMA, straight from Oklahoma City. Over the plain of tears and fears, over the mountains to hear the city different Indian school hippie crash. Let's dance. Where's the dorm matron? Hide the stash. We all admire Marlene. She's one of the best. She's Jackson Pollock in a dress. She only leaves the painting studio for sleep or work, and on Sunday she sneaks out to the Indian hospital on the other side of campus. She took me once. The children laughed and clapped when she came in. She brought them gifts. All her desserts saved up for a week. Crayons, paper, and tiny fans. We hid when the staff came in. They eventually threw her out because the hospital carried no insurance to cover the harm she might do. And Venus, now that's a name and a history. One parent from the north on the back of a horse and the other from the south over the back of a river. Venus is a singer, a real singer. Each singer has a particular gift. Some grow plants, some call helpers, some heal the sick, some make the dead rise up and dance. When Venus sings, we enter into a trance. We no longer hurt from freak chance. You're going to make it to Broadway, either New York or Albuquerque. Mary, Mary, quite contrary, you're as silent as a mouse in the corner of the dining hall, chewing on stale American bread. We don't know who you are or where you've been. Maybe you're dead to this reality. None of us are coping well with a BIA. We've read the reports. Doesn't play well with others. Won't speak or look us in the eyes. Talks to ghosts. But we hear what they're really saying. We have the guns. We have your children. Mary's spirit is mostly underground with clay. When she's with us, she roams the halls in precise eyeglasses, bell-bottoms laced tight, and a stack of poetry in her arms. T.S. Eliot, she says, needed to put his hands in clay. She reads him every day, perched with her books outside the powwow circle. Where's Kip? We can't find her anywhere. She's not in the laundry room practicing powwow in her underwear. She's not on the roof where she sneaks her smokes. She's not in the tent she made of government-issued bedspreads where she sketches high fashion of Indians in Paris. Here comes Kip with a knife, and there she goes. No top or bottom, only fury whirling in a spiritual nudity. She's headed out into the snow. She's what happens when somebody hurts the baby. We can corner our sheets so a quarter spins and know the drill for shots, debugging, and towels. We have a chance. Long too. I mean, it's not too long. It's in 6 parts. It's conflict resolution for holy beings. And this title was inspired by this Dene man, Norman Patrick Brown, who was a performer. He was helping it's now called Dene College. It used to be called Navajo Community College, but he and some others got started putting plays on in the Navajo language. And now he's, I guess, become part of the Navajo government, tribal government, and continues working. And he's Norman Patrick Brown. And in a Facebook post, sometimes you can find poetry there, he wrote, "I am the holy being of my mother's prayer and my father's song." And that inspired this conflict resolution for holy beings. And then I was going through something, and that became the impetus or the engine for moving through here, even though what I was going through here is really not totally mentioned. But that's how it happens. And so I started looking at rules for conflict resolution. So each of the 6 sections is a rule for conflict resolution. They're pretty universal. And someone here read a poem earlier, conflict resolution. And, okay. I guess one of the struggles we're dealing with our tribe, and I was there, I guess when I was working on this poem, I was there with, not part of the contingent, my husband was part of the contingent of our ceremonial grounds, going to D.C., they keep making trips to D.C., like my grandparents, and they're always to deal with government and so on to help. But we're still connected. Our particular grounds came from Alabama, what's now known as Alabama. And so there was some land there where our people lived, where the ceremonial grounds was. And that was given over to a first state-recognized group of Muskogee Creek descendants, who had, for the most part, lost a lot of the culture, but they were still a group. And it was a historic landmark, historic place. So usually, you have historic landmarks and places all over this part of the world. And those, people can't just go destroy them or dig them up. I think the whole purpose is to keep them in perpetuity for, to honor our history and who we are and to take care of them. Well, this group was given this as a National Historic Landmark place, and there's certain protections provided by the government. Well, this group decided to dig up our relatives and put a casino there. And even though these protections, they were able to work around those protections with money, etc. And now the government, no one will touch it because they say, well, it's Indian against Indian. And yet, so that's kind of in here a little bit. It's a lot more, anyway, conflict resolution for holy beings. 1, set conflict resolution ground rules. Recognize whose lands these are on which we stand. Ask the deer, turtle, and the crane. Make sure the spirits of these lands are respected and treated with goodwill. This land is a being who remembers everything. You will have to answer to your children and their children and theirs. The red shimmer of remembering will compel you up in the night to walk the perimeter of truth for understanding. As I brushed my hair over the hotel sink to get ready, I heard, by listening we will understand who we are in this holy realm of words. Do not parade, please, with yourself. You must speak the language of justice. 2, use effective communication skills that display and enhance mutual trust and respect. If you sign this paper, we will become brothers. We will no longer fight. We will give you this land and these waters as long as the grass shall grow and the river run. These lands and waters they gave us did not belong to them to give. Under false pretenses we signed. After drugging by drink we signed. With a mass of gunpowder pointed at us we signed. With a flotilla of warships at our shores we signed. We are still signing. We have found no peace in this act of signing. A casino was raised up over the gravesite of our ancestors. Our own distant cousins pulled up the bones of grandparents, parents, and grandchildren from their last sleeping place. They had forgotten how to be human beings. Restless winds emerged from the earth when the graves were open, and the winds went looking for justice. If you raise this white flag of peace, we will honor it. At Sand Creek, several hundred women, children, and men were slaughtered in an unspeakable massacre. After a while, a white flag was raised. The American soldiers trampled the white flag in the blood of the peacemakers. There is a suicide epidemic among Native children. It has tripled the rate of the rest of America. It feels like wartime, said a child welfare worker in South Dakota. If you send your children to our schools, we will train them to get along in this changing world. We will educate them. We had no choice. They took our children. Some ran away and froze to death. If they were found, they were dragged back to the school and punished. They cut their hair and took away their language until they became strangers to themselves, even as they became strangers to us. If you sign this paper, we will become brothers. We will no longer fight. We will give you this land and these waters in exchange as long as the grass shall grow and the rivers run. Put your hand on this Bible, this blade, this pen, this oil derrick, this gun, and you will gain trust and respect with us. Now we can speak together as one. We say, put down your papers, your tools of coercion, your false promises, your posture of superiority, and sit with us before the fire. We will share food, songs, and stories. We will gather beneath the starlight and dance and rise together at sunrise. The sun rose over the Potomac this morning, over the city surrounding the White House. It blazed scarlet, a fire opening truth. White House, or Chogoheki, means the house of the peacekeeper, the keeper's justice. We have crossed this river to speak to the white leader for peace many times. Since these settlers first arrived in our territory and made this their place of governance, these streets are our old trails, curved to fit around trees. 3, give constructive feedback. We speak together with this trade language of English. This trade language enables us to speak across many language boundaries. This language has given us the poets, Ortiz, Silko, Mamadé, Alexi Diaz, Woody, Kane, Bitsui, Long Soldier, White, Erdrich, Tapahanzo, Hal, Lewis, Brings Plenty, Okapic, Hill, Wood, Miracle, Cisneros, Trask, Hogan, Dunn, Welch, Gould. The 1957 Chevy is unbeatable in style. My broken down one-eyed Ford will have to do. It holds everyone, grandma and grandpa, aunties and uncles, the children and the babies and all my boyfriends. That's what she said anyway, as she drove off with the 49 with all of us in that shimmying wreck. You might try dancing theory with a bustle or a jingle dress or with turtles strapped around your legs. You might try wearing colonization like a heavy gold chain around a pimp's neck. 4, reduce defensiveness and break the defensiveness chain. I could hear the light beings as they entered every cell. Every cell is a house of the God of light, they said. I could hear the spirits who love us stomp dancing. They were dancing as if they were here, and then there another level of here, and then another until the whole earth and sky was dancing. We are here dancing, they said. There was no there. There was no I or you. There was us. There was we. There we were as if we were the music. You cannot legislate music to lockstep, nor can you legislate the spirit of the music to stop at political boundaries, or poetry or art or anything that is of value or matters in this world and the next world. This is about getting to know each other. We will wind up back at the blues, standing at the edge of the flattered fifth, about to jump into a fierce understanding together. 5, eliminate negative attitudes during conflict. A panther poised in the cypress tree about to jump is a panther poised in the cypress tree about to jump. The Panther is a poem of fire, green eyes, and a heart charged by 4 winds of 4 directions. The panther hears everything in the dark. The unspoken tears of a few hundred human years, storms that will break what has broken his world, a bluebird swaying on a branch a few miles away. He hears the death song of his approaching prey. I will always love you, sunrise. I belong to the black cat with fire green eyes. There, in the cypress tree near the morning star. 6, and use what you learn to resolve your own conflicts and to mediate others' conflicts. When we made it back home, back over those curved roads that wind through the city of peace, we stopped at the doorway of dusk as it opened to our homelands. We gave thanks for the story, for all parts of the story, because it was by the light of those challenges we knew ourselves. We asked for forgiveness. We laid down our burdens next to each other. I guess I'll close with, I don't know what time it is. Okay. I'll close with this one called Equinox, because we are right at an equinox period. And we got the full moon happening. Suddenly there's super moons. But just like super storms, but we do have super storms. Those tornadoes are like many, many times the power that they used to have. So it makes sense, I guess there's the supermarkets, super storms. Maybe one follows another. Anyway, I was standing. One of the things, you know, a lot of traditional people teach, and I've been lucky to be around some really wonderful teachers. One thing that every one of these teachers, and they've been in many cultures, mostly tribal cultures, but many cultures, the one thing that connects the ones is that they all believe, they all honor, they're not racist, they honor everyone, and they treat everyone well. The one thing they've taught me is that, well, it is common sense, actually, if you think about it. And you can prove it scientifically if you need to have the scientific method on every thought that you have or every possible pathway, is that, of course, the sun is our beautiful, incredible being of light. You might say, well, it's a chemical reaction, that's fine. It's it's still a living thing. A chemical reaction is a living thing. And if you rise up, you notice that a lot of those people who keep knowledge often they stay up all night, but they're there, even if they stay up, they're there for sunrise, because that's that point when that sun crosses the horizon is you can gather energy. We're all gathering energy. We gather it by food or sometimes not by food, but we always gather energy from each other, from each other's words, from poetry, from the artists. You know, we're human beings and all animals. We have all plants. We're all about gathering energy and using it and so on. So the sun, it's good to be there to greet the sun and to be there because you gather energy. You do in so many ways. And so sunset too it's a time of letting this stuff flow away. So I was thinking about this as I was standing in Michigan somewhere, spring equinox, waiting to be picked up, and thinking about how sunrise is good for gathering, and then sunset, it's good for letting go. It's good to just let things go. Because it does often, if you think about it, it often evokes nostalgia and those kinds of things, and a certain sense of amazement for life. But think of it, if you let it go, if you stand there and let go, all the things, you kind of move through your day and think of all those things that jammed you up, or things you said that you wish you hadn't said, or things you did, or that other people did to you, or you perceive they did to you because sometimes they didn't and you think they did, and so on. But if you were to let that go, I let go Donald Trump and all his stuff. I let this go, just let it go, and that, the sun's drag force, it takes it with it and let it go. I think we can be a little healthier. So this is Equinox. It's a poem song about letting go. And I want to say thank you, Meadow. Meadow is how we say thank you, and Miss Gogi, for inviting me here up in this place. I don't have much time here this time, but thank you. Thank you, Kathy, for being the doorway and for taking good care. And all of you, it's so good to sit in here. Poetry. And hear your poetry. And hear poetry going on in the world. I must keep from breaking into the story by force. If I do, I will find a work club in my hand, and the smoke of grief staggering toward the sun, your nation dead beside you. I keep walking away, though it has been an eternity, and from each drop of blood springs up sons and daughters and trees, a mountain of sorrows, of songs. I tell you this from the dusk of a small city in the north, not far from the birthplace of cars and industry. Geese are returning to mate, and crocuses have broken through the frozen earth. Soon they will come for me, and I will make my stand before the jury of destiny. Yes, I will answer in the clatter of the new world. I have broken my addiction to war and desire. Yes, I will reply, I have buried the dead and made songs of the blood, the marrow.
Like to thank Joy for this amazing weekend and this fabulous performance, and to thank our sponsors that I neglected to mention. Let's see if I can rattle them all off. Let's see. City Adirondack Writers Project, the English Division, the Campus Bookstore, Barnes & Noble, Northshire Books, Adirondack Center for Writing, Crandall Public Library, the Faculty Student Association, and the AZC Foundation. And thank you, Joy.
Thank you. Now's the question and answer time. Well, people always ask first about my tattoo. And the Muskogee people used to tattoo extensively. Women too, and the tattoos were around certain events. And so there's a lot of meaning in this, and this is, we don't have anyone tattooing in our tribe, but I lived in Hawaii for 11 years and was close friends with Keone Nunez, who is he brought back the tattoo art for Hawaiian people, and he's also helped some of the California groups. He's taught people, he's been teaching others. And yes, the tattoo has a meaning. No, I'm not going to go into it all, and because I don't have to tell everything, but and I got it in Tahiti. Keone didn't do this one. He did. I have one that goes down my leg. It's done the old style. He started doing the old style, and yes, it does hurt. I was going to do a whole comedy routine based on my tattoo. Does it mean anything? No. I just went in and da-da-da-da. But so anyway, that's what they were for. They marked, and I saw this on my hand for some time, and before I went in and had it done. Ro'o Nui, he returned for a while. He moved up into Quebec, but he's living now in Papeete, Tahiti, and back home. But it's Tahitian. There's Tahitian elements as well as Marquesian island elements, and I thought the Marquesian tattoo designs is very similar to a lot of Muskogeans' designs. Yeah. Uh-huh.
I teach poetry to people recovering from mental illness and addiction, and I'd like to know how you feel about the healing power of poetry.
Yes. Definitely. I mean, I think that's what pulled me to it, even though I've always had a heart, intellect, love of poetry and words and working with words. But in my own, I talk about it in my memoir, Crazy Brave, about how really the spirit of poetry pulled me into it. I was in line to be a painter. But it came at a time, the spirit of poetry came at a time when I needed to learn how to speak and listen, more than anything. I think any of our arts is listening. I mean, that's when you teach literature, it's about listening. When you write, it's about listening. When you're a medical person, a healer, it's about listening. You're listening to so many levels all at once. And so yes, I think poetry and it's words, and your words are either going to assist or either going to assist or heal, or they're going to destroy. And of course I'm on the advisory board for literature for all of us out of Chicago, and we're talking with them about getting a program there in the Creek Nation, my tribal nation, for teenage. It started out as a program for teenage girls writing poetry, and I contacted them, I believe, first because I wanted to go up there, and the girls, they became empowered learning to write poetry and reading it. Then they started, and I thought this was important too, they started including the young men in their groups, the fathers. And that's been very successful too. And there's so many stories of, all over poetry being a healing for, any kind of creative art really, and participating. And definitely is, that's what moves me about writing, but partly is that. And I think I was an art major at UNM, listening to a lot of poetry when and I write about that in Crazy Brave Little, that I was sitting up late and I was talking to a young mother who's a poet outside, and she was talking about having two little boys, and it's hard to write, with a woman. Even now I find that different than my male counterparts, I always have all these responsibilities that they don't have. There's always these family responsibilities. Yeah, the kids grow up, and my poems went from, being one image poems to, they grew because of the time I had, and I was able to go in places because the time element worked out. But, now where was I going? There was something. It'll come back to me. I was going somewhere with that. Yeah, but there was something else. I'll come back to it. Anyway, yeah, that's my jet lag. I've done pretty good with the jet lag so far. But but definitely. It's a healing art.
I spoke to a woman up in the Northwest Territory, a Native American, who seemed very unhappy with having been taken away from family and put to the special schools. Yeah, you said it saved your life, the school you went to.
It was a different school. I was almost sent to a school where they were chaining students to beds.
Excuse me?
I was almost sent to a school where they shut it down because of they were doing things like chaining students to beds who misbehaved. So there were many of them. I mean, the church schools, and even now, we see my son-in-law was dragged out of his home. He was playing in his yard, a Navajo guy, and he's 10 years younger than me. And he was playing in his yard, and the missionaries came and dragged him from his yard and took him away because they could. They look at the way someone lives and say, okay, well, let's help you. They use it for an excuse to take the children away. So yes, there were still, in the school, like what I had said earlier, there were whole, I have a grandmother who was sent to Carlisle. They were basically wholesaling children, taking them out. And so yes, that's still part of it. But this school is different from a lot of them, and you'll hear a lot of young and older. Seems like every generation I hear it from the students saying, well, I went there and this, a school saved my life. I used to have students, I remember one student came in who had been in 3 car wrecks that weekend. One of my student poets there. And people are still battling. I mean, this stuff keeps coming up in your family until you deal with it. And when you get older, and I was a young grandmother, so that's kind of helped me see things a little sooner than I might have, is that you start seeing that, and I guess with my mother being gone, sometimes I'm aware of wrestling with something that doesn't belong to me, but it was passed through to me to deal with. And so I try to deal with it so it doesn't pass to my grandchildren. It might be something very literal. It's like, well, this isn't mine, but I'll think, okay, then I'll sit with that energy and work with it so that it doesn't attach itself to the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren. And so I think it's that way with generations. I think of every generation as a being. And there are things that every generation comes in to take care of certain things for the whole group. Just like a person in the family, everybody in the family, and there's all kinds of ways of names for the roles that people play. But they come in and we all take care of something in our family. Some people write and upset people. Some people write and tell stories of the family whether they want to or not. Other people become the renegade, and others, and generations are like that too. Uh-huh.
I noticed that while you were reading, in between you speak a lot about ancestry, and you just spoke about your ancestors and the women in your family that came before you. And so I was the woman that you spoke to earlier about her two boys and just trying to, be a mother to them, but I'd also like to be an example for them. I'd like for them to inherit a knowledge of strong women in their life, and because of the strong women in my life and how they've influenced my poetry. How much of your poetry do you feel is inherent, or it's something that it's in you, and how much of that do you feel is cultivated by schooling or more of the technical aspects of poetry, or that you can
That's a good question.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So how much of it do you feel is inherent, and how much of it do you feel is influenced by your education or schooling?
I guess we could go to, is it B.F. Skinner or these other people? Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it's a mixture of both. I mean, I fought with the spirit of poetry. It's like, who do I see that's a poet? What am I going to do with this? And everybody else, when I changed my major to poetry, I mean, first I was pre-med because I'm very interested in healing and the healing arts, but I've learned you can do healing arts. You don't have to go, and I wanted to be a surgeon because I love cutting, I started practicing. I could tie a knot with one hand, and I was practicing and then studying on my own. And I still love that, and I still read medical things on my own. But I learned immediately. I'd gone to Indian school and taken arts classes and took basics, which are very poorly taught, by the way. But the arts are, So when I went into my first chemistry, I didn't know what chemistry was. I hung in there, but I realized that's not my path. Because I was a pre-med major with a dance minor. But then because I still love dance, but then I went back into art, the art classes. And then the poetry, and I've always loved poetry. I always loved sound. My mother used to write songs, and she loved poetry, and I loved it. But, I was going to be an artist, and I loved painting. I would stay up all night and paint. I would have to paint when the children went to sleep. I would be up at night doing my work because after all of the stuff that I had to do, often as a single mother, and even when I had a partner, it was me doing all the work, like that kind of work that the mother does. Even now, as a grandmother, grandmother, step-grandmother, I'm in charge of, who takes care of birthday, who takes care of all. We still do all that. So it is different than my male compatriots or, artists. They don't really, there's just a lot that, it's just what you do. And but the spirit of poetry, I realized that it was beyond me. And I come up several times, and I know we all have this, where that there's something you're supposed to do and that you have to do it. And we all have stories when we've told our spirit no. I remember one time my spirit came to me, and I was having a good time in the 80s, and there were things you don't want to hear about. And, and my spirit came to me and said, okay, this is what we need to do now. This is part of your... And I said, no, I want to have fun. I can't believe I said that, but that's where I was. My mind was at that point. I'd been a teenage mother. I'd raised kids, and I just wanted to, I just didn't want to be held by more. But I paid for it 7 years. I went through 7 years paying for it. And then I said, okay. And I think the spirit of poetry, I think part of it's in you. I think it's always, it's there. I realize now it comes from, there's my grandfather 7 generations back who was very eloquent and also was really great at stealing horses up into the Cumberlands of Tennessee, and was also a speaker and went to Washington, D.C., visited with Tecumseh and helped start the Red Sticks and the Red Stick Rebellion and fought against Andrew Jackson. Of course he was a person of words. My great-grandfather, Henry Marcy Harjo, he's with me now. I mean, I still feel it. You know, he's still around me. He was, did also, you know, a school superintendent and this and that in the Creek Nation, and very well-spoken man. And so it was in me. And I knew there's a knowing. We are all given knowing. We all have knowing within us. It's there. Sometimes we hide it. We don't want to hear it. But we always know the way we're supposed to go. So when I took up poetry, it's like, oh, well, we can't give you any more money. We can't get you any graduate school money because you came last on the list with somebody in theology, You know, those kinds of things. Because poetry in this world, in this society, isn't often as valued. I think it will come back up again. I can see it in these young students and the people, and you guys all reading together. It's still there. We go to poetry for understanding what we can't understand by the usual means, you know. So all that to say, and then some of it, yes, I went to the Iowa Writers Workshop. I survived the Iowa Writers Workshop. You might get a t-shirt. It's good for crafting and for that sort of thing, but it almost did me in at the same time. Sandra Cisneros talks a lot about it too. And she and I were students there and helped each other get through. But you know, it was good for a lot. I mean, you know, it turns out everybody was feeling the same way, even the people that you felt were the favorite ones. You know, they were still going through it too. But there's some of that, of course. And, you know, I have my teachers. I have my first teachers at the University of New Mexico, Gene Frumkin and David Johnson, were wonderful. They were important. Those early poetry teachers were very, very important. You know, books of poetry that I would read as a child, the Louis Bentemeyer collections of poetry. And, you know, you just do what I had to go that way. And I knew that I had to, and I didn't know where it would lead. You know, what are the odds? What are the odds of a Native woman getting the Wallace Stevens Award? You know? There's Sherman Alexie, but he's another whole character. Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about like the empowerment that comes from people who are very similar banding together. You know, the gay community or women or people of color or, you know, tribes, even if they're not clans and tribes. And then also the necessity that we all have to cross those lines so that we're not always in our sameness group. You know, I went to a conference that was all women this summer. It was great. But, you know, now I'm back in reality, and I would love for you to talk a little more about the pros and cons or just the sort of dance of having both, that empowering community of people who speak the same language or share culture, and then how to move out and make something bigger, and what that means, what you think about all that.
Well, we live in the world of opposition, of opposites, or duality. So you say you're in a big gathering of women and so on. Well, you know that to balance that out, there's going to be there's balance in the universe. You know, that's how it is. I mean, we need those places where we can gather to feel strong. Indian school, I wanted to go to Indian school too, especially, I was going to go to the other Indian school, and they found out at the Indian agent's office that I did art. They told me about this other opportunity, but for me, I wouldn't talk in class. I didn't feel comfortable. I would sit and draw and you know, and I always had friends, everybody. I always had friends with everybody, but with everybody, you know, mathematicians, I don't know, I always get along really well with mathematicians or something. But I think of it like poetry too. But I would be I would be very close with Native students, and then but I was friends with everybody else too. But it was important for my selfhood, and we all have those groups. Some people, my brother is great, they get together and talk about cars. You know, this is funny, the one line out of my book that they both liked and they questioned me about for hours was the 1957 Chevy was impeccable in style. Because they love cars, and it's car language, and they can tell you anything about any engine or any make or model of almost any car. That's their world. And they feel that world, it gives them, we all have places of belonging. You know, and that's important, and that's just how we are. But it's important, the other part of that, you know, like being in I'm missing being in an important ceremonial circle right now. And I miss that because there's a certain way that there's a part of, we have so many parts to ourselves, so many levels. We don't even know about all of them, but we know when we can just be ourselves. In other circles we get in, it feeds other parts of ourselves. You know, there's groups I can be with, and I feel absolutely that aren't in that. You know, I just feel like there's many different worlds. You know, being around poets. Sometimes I tend to hang out more with musicians and writers. I'll go up to famous saxophonists and talk to them, and we visit, and I'll hang out. And I don't necessarily always do that with writers, which is kind of funny. You know, it's just, but it's important in those groups. I mean, that's that we're always getting the lesson of the others. So it's important for tribal groups or for, you know, to certainly not to be so. It's important. We're like biological system, a healthy biological system or a healthy system, a sociological system. There's a flow. Things can move in and out, but you still maintain an integrity. And I think that's what needs to happen. And I don't know, is that you have an integrity about your group, but you're not, you know, using your group as a sledgehammer, a collective sledgehammer. And there's an energy can move in and out. Because what I see sometimes, people hanging on, especially if there's been great trauma, they will hang on just so tight that it's hard for them to continue developing their art or developing in a certain kind of way. I see that with religious groups. I'm in the Bible Belt, and it's very much like that. It's very difficult to maneuver. You can't really, on some level, there's some wonderful people. You know, some of them are my family members. Wonderful people, but there's a place that, you know, there's a place that's just it's stultification. You cannot. So to, you know, move. So it's important. That's where education is important. And a lot of them, people don't want to be educated outside of, be protective. I understand why people are protective. I can understand that, but it becomes tricky. I mean, that's important. Now, I don't know exactly. I don't have the answers, but you know, that's what I have to say right now, I guess. Uh-huh.
You talked about the importance not only of craft, but also of keeping some integrity as a part of your work and encouraging students to do that too. How do you go about that?
About keeping integrity?
Yeah, how do you get students to see that it matters what spirit the poem's written in and to convey that as not just the craft itself?
It sounds like there's a story behind that. Yeah. There usually is.
Not really.
Yeah, not really. I don't know. I think that, I don't know if you can determine what's behind it from them. I guess sometimes you can. You can always bring people in, Adrian Ridge for one, you know, people who talk about what they do. You know, bring their work in, bring their writing in. Bring in, you know, a lot of times students are going through, you know, look at 9/11, or they go through, students are always going, you know, you bring in work and show how it can be, how it is absolutely relative to them. And you can talk about it that way, integrity, and morality even, and all sorts of things. And bring in people who talk about that. When I teach a poetry workshop, I always bring in other kinds of writing and other poets and so on.
Do you believe that the world has more than just this dimension? Because my dad can, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's almost like he's Indian in a way. When he wears a watch, it never works, and he can sense like water underground. I know it's, and he feels spirits, but the way he makes it sound is that there's more than one dimension, that spirits walk in the world with us and that they avoid where we step. Almost like they're here, but only some of us can sense and see them.
Yeah, I don't think it's just, I see what you're saying, it's it's a human thing, but we've been educated to see within a certain spectrum. And there was somebody who was reading earlier in the community reading, talking a little bit about this. And then I was talking with my keyboard player as we were going back to the dressing room and getting ready to perform. And he and I had both paid attention to the same things. Did you see that little green beetle, and how green it was under there? I said, yeah, I almost stopped and photographed it. And then we were talking about how many realms there are. There's the physical, and then can you see the intellectual realm? You can see evidence of it when you write, but can you see it? What about the heart? Can you see that realm? And there's so many realms. And there's, you come in here with the feelings. There's things that have happened. There's history that's happened. Sometimes you can go someplace, try that tower in London, you can feel all kinds of crazy stuff in there. That happens. You go to the 9/11 area, you can feel, there's just so many levels. And some people, we all feel these things, we don't always know. Some people are totally cut off from them in their mind, well, this can't happen, but we all feel these things. Some people are very gifted, or they, focused in that area. Some people, I've got, you can see people sometimes from, there's just so many, like the realm of those people who have gone is just as close as like this, but you can't see between there, but it's that close. What do poets work with? We work with those realms. So do artists work with? Thinkers. What do we work with? We work with those realms. I remember my mother, I helped her the last 3 months of her life, and my mother was very rowdy and strong, and she was everywhere. After she passed, everybody saw her. Because that's who she was. Other people, I had a stepsister who was almost her age who passed, and she had been ill a lot. She wasn't right there. I've felt her more lately, but boy, my mother, and she had told me, she said, I will be closer to you when I'm gone than now. And that's true, whether I like it or not. Sorry. Sorry, Mom. But yeah, I think certainly it's that way. And I think about working with poetry, and what I love about it so much is I move into realms that I'm moving into realms of understanding in places. And yes, I do some hardcore research, even for poetry, but I also do research. There's the research of the spirit, where you can have access to all kinds of knowledge. There's the research, of the mind. And we know that books can be correct and sometimes not, but you can also study them as relics of history or relics of a time and a place. And all of that, I guess when you have a balance of all of that is when everything kind of comes together. Some of us can get way out of balance in one realm, in one way or the other. But I think it's the human, for a full human education, you would have, all of those would be balanced. That's why I want to start a school for the kids, you would balance all of that out, community service, et cetera, et cetera. But you had another question, and then I guess we should cut the questions.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say that you brought up the importance of listening as it relates to listening to other poetry, or just, listening to people in your everyday life and those things you can pick up. There was a poet that had done a poem last building about how he overheard a conversation and how that inspired, the impetus for a poem.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to say to that, if you hadn't been listening to me, that I'm not sure what compelled me to tell you about Tomahawk exactly, but I feel like that I needed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that you
No, I've always had a hard time listening. And I think, I think that's why the poetry spirit came to me. Is like, okay, this one is a hard case. This one's really hard. We're going to have to really work hard for this one. And it's an ongoing, I think listening is a very dynamic art. It's very dynamic. But we're in a world that really values people getting out and yelling. I mean, you know, look at what's going on in politics. The person who has the most bluster and can yell the loudest is getting, you know, and is, you know, is a kind of trickster. He's getting the most attention. And yet, what's considered passive is really not quite so passive. You know, it leads to, that's how one night I heard my father, now he's been gone since '84, and I was sitting there, and you can't really hear a lot until you're sitting there, you can't hear with your buds in, I mean, you can hear whatever's going, you know, TV stuff, and all of these signals which operate at in a certain realm, so to speak. But if you want to hear deeper, you know, if you want to read philosophy or poetry, that's hearing deep, you know, hearing deeper. You have to have quiet. There has to be a certain kind of quiet within yourself. You can't, if you're turbulent in here, you're not going to hear anything. So you have to kind of quiet it down. And I remember sitting there in my place one night, when I was alone, and sitting there, and my father, I heard my father told me, I'm very proud of you. I thought, whoa, that was my dad. No, I'm not just hearing voice, it was really my dad. And I needed that at that moment. And it's like my granddaughter, Desiree, one of her poems opens up the book. I have two granddaughters' poems in here. And they're all very gifted that way. They're all very gifted artists. And she says, she was about 7, 8, because her sister was older. Her oldest sister, my daughter's has 6 children ranging from now 24 to 3. She's a wonderful mother and an artist. She made me this. And anyway, Desiree, I remember her saying, Nana, she said, the angels used to come and see me all the time, and then now I have to share a room with Krista, and Krista has her computer, is listening to music at night, she leaves it on all night, and the angels don't like that, and they won't come. And I said, okay, well, tell Krista, see if Krista can, you know, just tell her some nights not to play, or just ask the angels where they can meet you. You know? Or ask the angels, you know, say, some nights I don't want the, can we have a, you know, I tell your mom, you know, some nights you don't play the computer. She's very gifted that way. She's a painter, she likes to paint. And, but I think it's true, most kids are that way. They just don't say it. This is a lot of parents like saying, well, like my mom would say, oh, you have a big imagination. You know, we are. That's what we're right now. We're making stories in the imagination. And sometimes we sing, and that's cool. Okay, well, thank you.